Hello again, everybody. Our main focus today is going to be on a tool that I think is probably one of the most important things to use as a study methodology. It's the GTO Wizard Range Builder. So if you have access to GTO Wizard, you can follow along. If you don't have access to GTO Wizard, you can get 10% off your first subscription down in the description. So do check that out. The starting point that we're going to have is we're just going to run a sim with GTO Wizard AI, which I've already done. So just to give you guys a quick sense of how we do that, we fill out the ranges, we pick the betting structure. I'll do a future video in which we go into a bit more detail on how to use GTO Wizard AI in maybe more specific terms. But for now, we've run our sim. We're going to hit create solution. We're using the dynamic algorithm. So we're going to get a single bet size strategy here for the flop. And as you can see, the sizing that the solver prefers in this case is an 82% size, which is a 3E, 3-street geometric size. We're going to focus on using the range builder to estimate our ability to accurately construct a range here. But I'm not going to do it for this exact board texture because I've just seen what the sim looks like for this exact board texture. So what I'm going to do is test myself on a spot that I haven't seen. So I'm going to hit the board texture. I'm just going to click random. 9-8 deuce is a good board. Okay. This is the board we're going to go to. We've got it set to hard mode here, which is basically going to mean that at every point in the tree where there are multiple bet size options, it's going to give us full flexibility to choose between those options. If we hit medium, it would slightly simplify the options into small, medium, large bets. If we hit easy, it's just going to simplify into bet and check. So we're going to go with hard, particularly because we're using the AI and you mostly just can use hard every time with the AI if you're using sims that only have one size. And now we're going to start by trying to test our ability to come up with a good range for this 82% flop bet here. And we've got 2 hearts on the board, so there is a flush draw out there that we have to keep in mind. Now, to get started, what we want to do is focus on different portions of our range and what they're going to do. But when we're using a large bet size, one thing that we have to consider is that our bet is going to come from a relatively polarized range. And if we are exploring a bet that comes from a relatively polarized range, it actually makes more sense instead of doing what a lot of people do, which is go top down. So basically ending up with a linear range construction, we want to actually go top and then bottom, and then from both sides out into or towards the middle, right? Because the middle region of hands is going to be composed of hands that are least likely to be betting here. So we're going to start with the top end, then we're going to go to the bottom, and we're going to fill out the middle. So top end of our range, we're going to want to have some hands from each category here that are checking, right? We're not going to want to have any specific category of hands that is always betting, right? We're going to, by necessity, have to have some amount of balance in our approach. We're going to start by taking a look at the set region here, which we do have all 3 sets because we have deuces a little bit. But maybe if we put all those hands on bet, and then we start to think, okay, which would be the one set that would make the most sense here to potentially check if we were thinking about having some amount of checking frequency in there. And I think it's relatively transparent that it's pocket nines because it's top set, it blocks top pair, and it's going to have a slightly harder time getting value. So we're going to check top set, we're going to bet middle set, and we're going to bet bottom set. It's a decent starting point. Now, it probably isn't going to be 100% accurate here, but our goal is not to get 100% accurate. Our goal is to get relatively accurate so that we can just have a broad strokes idea of how we're constructing in this kind of a spot. And we're going to take it from there. So the next category is the 2 pair. And the only 2 pair we have here is 9-8 suited. But we have 2 combos of it, both of which do not have a backdoor flush draw. It's really difficult when you have a category of hands that's so small like this to split this range up. Normally, we would be looking at trying to have some 2 pairs that are checking back and some that are not. But I think for now, it's fine to just bet all the 2 pairs because there's really only 2 combos and it just isn't going to affect very much. But now we have the overpairs. And clearly, I think in this spot, there are going to be some overpairs that have more of an incentive to check than others. The ones that are likely to have the most incentive to bet are going to be the ones that are pretty vulnerable. So it's going to be 10s, jacks, and queens. So we're going to bet all of those. And then we're also going to bet kings and aces without a heart in them, specifically because the ones without a heart need a little bit more in the way of protection, or they're going to have a bit more inclination to get money in the pot now, as opposed to being a bit more willing to potentially check. So we're going to go with that. And we're not accounting for any mixing here. We could account for mixing if we wanted, but I'm going to keep it fairly simple for now and just make the assumption that we're just playing every hand pure 100% one thing or 100% the other. Now, top pair. We have a bunch of combos of top pair here. And the most likely ones that are going to want to always bet are going to be the ace nines. I think we probably don't have any reason to ever check ace nine here, especially if we had a heart. But really, I think we can just bet all the ace nine. We can most likely bet all of the king nine as well, although you could maybe make an argument for checking the king nine, but I'm just going to put all the king nine in the bet. And then the queen nine and below, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have us check the queen nine, jack nine, and 10-9 that have diamonds and bet the ones that don't, because the ones without the backdoor need a little bit more in the way of protection. And as a general rule of thumb here, the value hands that don't have the backdoor are going to be a bit more inclined to bet, I would expect. And then the bluffs that do have the backdoor are going to be a bit more inclined to bet because they need that extra little bit of equity. So I think that's the direction we're going to go in, but we'll see how it pans out. Now with jack 9 and 10-9 and with 9-7, I actually think I'm going to just pure check with everything because we do want to have some top pairs that are checking back a bit more often here. I think that's probably a good way to go. And now that we've gotten down below top pair, I think this is a good point to switch to looking at the rest of the range, but to start from the bottom up. So let's go to the no made hand category. The absolute weakest hands in our range here that don't even have a draw are going to be stuff like 5-4, queen 6, queen 7, and really there's not much else in that category that's worse than king high. But these are hands that have such little equity that quite often they're going to fit into a betting range here because they just need to get as much fold equity right now as they possibly can. So we're actually going to put queen 6, queen 7, and 5-4 into our betting range, but only the spades and clubs for now. We're going to go into the backdoors in just a second. The next category, just above the very bottom, is going to be some of our king highs. Now, again, we're going to go into the backdoors in a little bit, but I think once again, it's probably pretty realistic and pretty reasonable that we can take the spades and the clubs and bet a lot of these king 3 through king 7 type hands. They don't have an overcard. Sorry, they only have one overcard, and they have an undercard that in some cases is going to interact with a couple of turn straight draws, but not really very many cases. But in particular, they benefit from just getting better king highs to fold. And they're just very weak hands that are probably going to have a pretty decent preference for bluffing here. So we're going to add those hands in there. And then we start to get into our weakest ace highs that don't have a draw, the ace 3 through the ace 7 as well. Now you could maybe make an argument for checking some of the ace 7 through ace 5 possibly, but I actually think we're going to do the same thing again with those hands here and just bet the ace 3, ace 4, ace 5, ace 6, ace 7 of spades and clubs. Now, that leaves us getting to the point where we're starting to think about draws and hands that have some kind of other equity. So let's be a bit more specific about those hands and what we want to do with them. We have the one card backdoor is the first category here, which is going to be basically the overcard broadways with a heart in them. And those hands are pretty valuable. Having a heart is pretty good here. But we're going to start by thinking about the ones that don't also have a straight draw. So we're not going to think about queen jack, queen 10, jack 10 just yet. We're going to think particularly about king jack and king 10 because these are the weakest ones, right? We've got king jack, king 10 with a heart. I think those are really good hands to bet here. They do have the ability to get better king highs to fold. And of course, they have that heart in there, which is going to add some extra fold equity. You could maybe even make an argument for any of the combos that have a diamond here also betting, and then just only checking like king jack with no diamond or heart, so just club and spade. But that's maybe a little excessive, so we're going to stick with just this for now. You could also make an argument for betting the king queens, and maybe for betting the ace jacks and ace 10s possibly, because you're now at the point where maybe you can get better ace highs to fold. But a lot of these hands are potentially in that region where once we bet, we mostly just get better hands to call and worse hands to fold, and that's not really ideal. So for now, I think we're going to veer away from this category, and we're going to come back to it in a bit, depending on where we end up and what kind of construction we end up with at the end. The next category is going to be the two-card backdoors. So it's going to be the diamonds. And in particular, the diamonds that are going to make the most sense to bet are going to be hands that also have some kind of other draw, or hands that don't really have a lot of showdown value. And in particular, the combos that make the most sense for that is going to be the ace 3 through ace 7, the king 3 through king 7, queen 6 and queen 7, and then maybe also king jack and king 10, because they can get better hands to fold and so on. So we're going to go with that in the way of the diamond backdoors. Then we have the gut shot, right? We have the queen 10, queen jack, and the jack 7, and the 6 5. And again here, we're going to avoid the ones with the flush draw because we're going to come back to them in a second. So we're just going to think about the ones that have the backdoor, or the ones that have either the single card backdoor or the 2-card backdoor. So we're going to go with the same policy that we previously had. We're going to go with any offsuit hand that has a heart. Queen jack and queen 10 is going to be in there. We're also going to go with any suited hand that has diamonds. Queen jack and queen 10 going to be in there. And jack 7 is also in there. So we're going to go the backdoor combos of those. And that, I think, 6 5. I forgot about 6 5 of diamonds. That's going to be, I think, a reasonable starting point. Then we've got the next category is the open enders, and that is going to be 10 7 and jack 10 and 7 6. So again, same thing, I think is pretty reasonable. We're going to go jack 10 with a heart. We're going to go jack 10 of diamonds, 7 6 of diamonds, and 5 4 of diamonds. Seems pretty reasonable. Then we also have the flush draws. And now this is where we start to get into some awkward territory, because there's flush draws that also have a pair here. Pretty good rule of thumb for playing draws with a pair is you want to make sure that you're maximizing the likelihood of free rolling somebody. So if we have a pair here in the form of an 8, we want to make sure that we can get called by a worse 8 and free roll that hand, because that's a really good outcome here. So we're going to start by thinking about the king 8 of hearts being a really good bet, and maybe the queen 8 of hearts as well. But when you start to get to like jack 8, 10 8, are we getting a better 8 to fold? Probably not. Are we getting a worse 8 to call? Probably not. It's plausible that with 8 7 or 8 6, we might be able to get a better 8 to fold. So you could maybe make the argument that 8 7 and 8 6 of hearts could actually bet here. And I am actually going to put that in there because I think this is possibly a pretty good way to go there. So we're going to put some of those pair plus heart in there. Also allows us to have an 8 occasionally for when we might be able to turn trips, which is nice. So we've got some flush draws in there. And then we're also going to look at the rest of the flush draws, because we have some unpaired flush draws too. We've got king 4 through king 7. We've got queen 7 and queen 6. We've got 5 4. And we've got some of the king 10 through king queen. And these hands are good enough that I think in most cases here, we're going to do pretty well by betting a lot of them. So what I'm going to do is highlight the hearts, and we're going to go king 3 through king 8. We're going to bet queen 7, queen 6. We're going to bet. We're going to come back to the combo draws in just a second. Then we're going to have the king 10 is also going to bet. King jack is going to bet. King queen, ambiguous. We'll keep that in the check for now, and we'll just kind of take it from there. So we've got good chunk of flush draws in there. Then we've also got nut flush draws is the next category up. And we're going to pretty much apply the same logic. We're going to go ace 3 through ace 7. Ace 10 and ace jack, you can make an argument for betting because maybe we can get some better combos to fold, but I'm going to split the difference here and put ace 10 in there. I'm actually going to do the same with the ace 10 off with the backdoor. Like I say, just splitting the difference. And then we have the combo draws. Now, we do actually have quite a few combo draws here. We've got a lot of them. We've got 7 6, 6 5. I forgot to put 5 4 in there. And I think basically considering that our opponent is unlikely to fold hands that these combos are free rolling against, I think we just benefit from betting a lot of them, pretty much all of them, honestly. I think it's going to be fine to do that. You could maybe find some checks with some of them in certain instances, but you might see that the sim actually wants to do some checking with some of these combos. But I think overall, we're doing pretty well by checking a lot of them. And then we come to the middle region. Then we come to the second pair and third pair and some of the other ace highs. Now, the thing about the ace highs here is that the ones that don't have a heart here or a diamond are actually going to be able to get called by some worse backdoors. So you could maybe make the argument that stuff like ace king of spades and clubs, ace queen of spades and clubs are actually decent value betting hands here. Maybe even ace jack of spades and clubs. So we're going to put those in there. And we're also going to put ace king off with just without the heart in there. This is a little weird, but could work pretty well. And you will see that sometimes the sim is going to prefer this. So we're going to highlight those. And we're also going to put ace jack offsuit in there as well. I think that's pretty good. King Queen in that territory where it pretty much wants to check. We're checking all pretty much all the combos of King Queen here. You could put some of those in there. The solver will probably want to do some mixing, but I think we're okay with where we're at there. And then we have the second pairs and the third pairs. Now, we didn't take into account the 8 of hearts earlier, and in fact, we're just going to come to the 8x in a second. The third pairs that we do have here, it's 7s through 3s. And I think the only ones that really have some incentive to bet would maybe be 3s and 4s with a heart, because they have the ability to fold out some of these pairs that are better than them. They also, considering they have a heart, they can drill a set in a kind of a favorable spot. 5s, the problem with 5s is if you drill a set with 5s, a straight also gets there, right? But having a low pair and drilling a set on the turn in a circumstance where that card is otherwise a brick is actually pretty good. So we're going to bet the low pocket pairs there. And then the final category is going to be, oh, we've got ace deuce here. We're going to bet ace deuce of diamonds. Forgot about that one. That's got a backdoor. And then we're also going to bet some of the 8x. We're going to bet all of the ace 8 because we get called by the worst 8x. We're going to bet, we're already betting king 8 of hearts. We're going to bet ace 8 offsuit with no heart, I think, because it deserves some protection. Yep, I think that's fine. And then what else do we have? We've got like a lot of 8x checking, jack 8, 10 8. This looks pretty good, honestly. I think this looks like a pretty well-rounded strategy. And if you look at the equity buckets here, one thing to look out for is what these basic equity buckets look like. What you want is, if you're picking a relatively polarized strategy, so you're using a fairly big bet size, you're going to want this. You're going to want like a curve on the edges of the betting region, right? You're going to want the red and the green to overlap in a way where there's a bit of a curve to it. What you don't want is this, because that's going to indicate that your trashy hands are basically just betting less often than your weak hands. Your weak hands are betting less often than your good hands, and your good hands are betting less often than your best hands. And that's a very linear approach, which ends up with a range that you're just not bluffing enough. So in the end, this is going to be the area where we want to land. Now, I'm not expecting this to be a perfect strategy by any means. I certainly get this plenty wrong, but I do think we will probably be doing pretty well. So I'm going to hit see results here, and we'll see how we did. Okay, so it's going to say inaccuracy. It's going to say this a lot. And the reason it's going to say this a lot is because it's taking each individual combo and it's grading the frequency that you chose to bet and things like that. So what you want is, instead of just looking at this overall number, you want to look at the equity buckets and you want to see how you did. And in fact, we did pretty well here because we got 3 out of the 4 categories on a green. We got more than 60% correct with the bulk of each of these categories. What we didn't get right was the weak hands. And this is essentially saying that we bet them too rarely, right? We were only betting them 47% of the time. We're supposed to be betting these middling hands 70% of the time. So we were not betting king queen when we actually should have been. We were not betting enough like 10-7, not betting enough like 7-6 and things like that. So we actually were a little bit off in our overall frequencies with some of these mediocre hands. But it's a pretty good range. We did pretty well. If we look at the advanced equity buckets, the only buckets that we got wrong, we actually got everything from 60% upwards, we got pretty correct. Getting a green here is very good. We also got a green on the weakest hands. We got a green on the bottom of our range. And it's only really the middle of our range that we were a little bit inaccurate on. What we didn't get is a red. We didn't get a red anywhere. And that's what you want. You want to avoid getting a red here. If you can do this exercise and you can get a green on all these categories, that's a really good, solid, well-rounded range that you're creating. And even if you get a yellow on a couple like this, you're doing pretty well. What you want to avoid is getting a red anywhere. We did get a red on one hand category, which is specifically the king highs. So that's something to look out for here. But overall, let's look at the draws. Yeah, we got a red on the back door, the 2-card back doors as well. So we were probably, what were we doing? Frequency-wise, we were good. It's really strict. Like, we were very good on the overall frequency of betting the back doors, but we didn't actually bet the right combos of back doors. So I think the learning point here in terms of how we use the range builder, it's just a really great tool for getting a broad perspective on how close to an optimal strategy you are in your overall ability to break down a situation and build it from the ground up. And it's a really powerful skill to have. It's a really important skill to have, especially if you're playing against some fairly tough opponents. Now, I built the strategy for the flop, but what I haven't done yet is build the strategy for the turn. Let's now go one step further and test ourselves on building a turn strategy. Now, the solver is going to assume that we are playing an optimal flop strategy as we proceed through to the turn. And it's also going to pick our turn sizing for us because we used the dynamic sizing algorithm here. So we're going with a 46% size. That's the size that it's picked for us on this Jack of Spades turn. And we're now going to have to build our range out once again. So this is, again, a great way to just test yourself on how you're doing over the course of a hand over multiple streets. And our goal here is to just get to a point where our strategy is doing pretty well, even if we're not perfect. Because a pretty good strategy is going to crush a human opponent. Let's now think about how we're constructing on this turn as well. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to follow the same protocols. We're going to go top and then bottom and then middle of range. And in this case, because we're looking at the turn, the middle of range is very likely to be doing a very high frequency of checking. We don't have to be as concerned about board coverage on the turn because there's only one street left to come. When there's two streets left to come, you have to be much more worried about it. The straight here, obviously top of our range, we are going to have quite a few combos of that. But if we're looking at the combos that maybe have the greatest incentive to bet, it's going to be the ones that have the slightly greater need for protection. And I would imagine that's going to be the combos that don't have the hearts here. The 10-7 of hearts, Queen 10 of hearts, I think those combos maybe just can be some of our traps. And maybe Queen 10 offsuit with a heart, could be in there as well. Although you could probably make an argument here that we don't actually need to check any straights. Just trying to think about whether that's actually the case here. Where are we at? So we've got, how much of our straights are we actually betting so far? 2/3 or so. Yeah, we'll stick with that. I think that it's debatable whether we really need to have much protection here in our check back range, but we'll allocate some and we'll just see how it goes. The pocket jacks, I think we're going to bet the ones that don't have a heart and check the ones that do. And then the other sets, the 9s, 8s, deuces, anything that we did bet the flop with, we're now going to bet the turn with. Two pairs, Jack 9, 9, 8. I think 9, 8 certainly benefits from betting here, considering that we unblock the Jack X that we can get value from. Jack 9, a little bit closer, maybe checking top 2 might make some sense here. So we're actually just going to keep that one as a check. Overpair, aces, kings, queens. Queens is a really good bet because we block the straight here. So I think we're actually just going to put all the combos of queens in there. And then, once again, I think when it comes to aces and kings, I think the ones that don't have a heart have a little bit more incentive to bet because they have a bit more of a get the money now approach. And we'll just go with that. So that leaves us with top pair. And we're now going to basically be in a situation where the top pairs that have the strongest incentive to bet are going to be the ones that can get the most value, right? Because we're not in that region now where top pair is super, super strong. So we're going to probably bet all of our ace jacks here that did bet the flop. If we turn ace jack, I would think that all ace jack probably wants to bet. So we're going to go with that. And then king jack is ambiguous because king jack didn't turn a straight draw. So king jack's actually worse than queen jack. I would probably say that queen jack wants to bet, but king jack doesn't here. Jack 10, though, that might want to bet because, particularly if we have like Jack 10 of hearts, maybe we can bet. But the other Jack 10s, I think, were middle strength, so maybe we just want to check that. Jack 9, Jack 8, those are two pairs. Oh, I forgot about the Jack 8 two pair. That's another one. Jack 8 probably wants to bet. Jack 9, we can check. That seems good. Jack 7, I don't think we really want to bet unless, it's Jack 7 of hearts. Yeah, I think we can bet Jack 7 of hearts. It's top pair plus a flush draw plus a gut shot. It's a pretty good hand. So we're going to go with that. And then now we're going to go down to the bottom of the range and start picking up bluffs. Now, it's noteworthy here that we're not betting a big size. We're actually betting smaller than we were on the flop. We're betting 46%. And because of that, our range is not going to be as polarized. It's going to be a little bit easier for us to not have to worry about having a significant amount of polarization in that betting range. But nevertheless, we are going to have some polarity in there. So we're going to start from the bottom and we're going to once again look at things in terms of what hands would make the best bluffs. Now, our no-made hand in this case, we do have some no-made hand, but we don't have a lot. And it's mostly queen high and then some low cards. The low cards here probably are not going to want to bluff very often unless we specifically have 5-4 of hearts, because we're actually blocking some of the stuff like the pocket pairs that we might be able to get to fold. So that's not an ideal thing to have. We're going to come back to the flush draws in just a second. We're not going to bet the 5-4s there. We're also probably not going to bet the 6-5s, simply because, again, they're blocking a lot of the stuff that we want to get to fold. And they're also in a position where they have the bad end of the straight draw. So they make a straight on a 7, which is not ideal because that loses to a 10. So we're probably in a position where we probably don't want to bet those. 7-6, a little bit different. A little bit of a better straight draw. We have an open ender there, straight to the 10 and to the 5. So I think the 7-6 of spades and clubs, we can probably bet. Also the diamonds, actually. So we can bet all those. It's noteworthy as well that we want to, in this case, we want to be betting hands on the turn that have comfortable decisions versus a check raise. Because we are going to get check raise sometimes here. But in particular, some of the hands that are going to have comfortable decisions are going to be hands that either have easy calls or easy folds. We mostly don't want to have a hand that is just turning into a bluff catcher against a raise, right? And 7-6 is a good example of a hand where if we do get raised, it's a pretty clear fold if we don't have the flush draw. But if we have 7-6 of hearts specifically, it really sucks to have to fold, but it also sucks to have to call because we have a weak straight draw and a 7 high flush draw, right? So that's kind of a good reason here why 7-6 of hearts, 6-5 of hearts as well, 5-4 of hearts might want to check instead of actually being part of our betting range. But let's go back up to the queen highs, because I think the queen high hands that don't have a flush draw are really good examples here of good betting hands. They do turn a gut shot, but they also have a trivially easy fold against a raise. So I think we're in pretty good shape betting our queen 6s and queen 7s. We've also then got the next category up, which is the king highs. And the king high flush draws are in a very awkward spot because they are particularly unhappy about getting raised here. Something like a king 7 or below is actually going to have a bit of a tough time against a raise because it really just has a flush draw plus king high. But something like king 10 of hearts or even a lot of these other king 10s, king queens may have slightly easier decisions. So in fact, the only real king highs that we have here that we're actually referring to when we're thinking about just king high without a draw, it's the king 4 through king 7 of the suits that don't have hearts. And what I would probably go with is the king 7s we can bet. King 6, king 5, king 4. It's a little bit more ambiguous, but I would say considering we're not that polar on this turn, it might serve better just to have these hands function as our give-ups or our checkbacks. So we're just going to leave them out for now, and we're going to see how that functions and see if we can come back to it later. Ace highs, next category. Once again, we are going to have a lot of these ace 6s through ace 3s, and those hands are going to be pretty content to, I think, check a lot here because, again, they're blocking a lot of the folds. They're blocking some of the weakest hands in our opponent's range. However, not having diamonds is a good thing in this case because the ace highs that have diamonds are blocking some of the diamond draws that would have check called the flop and then check folded the turn. But something like ace 6 of spades, ace 6 of clubs, ace 3 of clubs, that sort of stuff, those hands are pretty good in the sense that we're unblocking all of those nut diamond draws that would have potentially just had the incentive to check call the flop and then check fold the turn. Ultimately here, I think we're probably going to do okay by betting a lot of these combos. We're going to put the spades and the clubs in the bet there. Let's see, spade, club, put those in there. And we're going to do the same with king 6 and king 5, just so that we can do something with those bluffs here. King 4 does not have spades, clubs, or diamonds in there for betting the flop. Now, the next category beyond that is going to start to get into some of the overcards, some of the hands that have a bit more in the way of gut shots and things like that. So we'll move over to the draws now. We obviously don't have any backdoors because the backdoor didn't arrive. And so we're thinking now about gut shots. And there are plenty of hands that have gut shots here. We're not going to worry about the ones that have a pair just yet. We're going to deal with them later. But we do have the weakest gut shot here is 6-5. And I mentioned that hand is, when we have 6-5 of hearts, it sucks to get raised. When we have 6-5 of any of the other suits, it doesn't really suck that much to get raised. We just fold. So I think we're okay with just betting the 6-5s there. The next gut shot up from there is going to be, we've already got the king 7s, the queen 7s. We're betting a lot. Queen 9 has a pair. And then really we just get to king queen, right? King Queen, I think we're in an interesting territory because King Queen of hearts can bet and then just call a raise. King Queen of the other suits is in kind of an awkward spot in that it doesn't really like continuing against a raise. It might still be able to, but wouldn't surprise me here if King Queen without hearts actually just wants to check back. Now, King Queen with one heart, again, ambiguous spot, but one heart gives us a lot of good river bluffing potential here. So I'm going to put King Queen with one heart in the betting range and just go with that. See where we get to. Ace Queen is actually the next hand on the list here because that's another gut shot hand. We've got Ace Queen high turning a gut shot in this particular case. Now I'm going to probably apply the same logic here, except that Ace Queen doesn't have as much incentive to continue against a raise as King Queen does, because it doesn't have that implied odds of being able to make the nut straight. It just makes the Queen high straight. So I'm going to have Ace Queen of hearts bet, and then I'm going to have the spades and the clubs just check here. With the offsuits, I'm going to have the heart combo bet, and then I'm going to have the other combos check. Next category up is the open-enders. So clearly we've got a lot of hands that contain a 10. I think it can be very common that people will make the mistake of always betting with any 10 here. And it's definitely important to note that there's a big difference between some 10s and other 10s. Now, in this case, ace 10 of hearts, combo draw, we're actually, I guess we've already covered a couple of the combo draws, but we'll come back to that in a second. We're going to look at the 10x hands that don't have the hearts in there as well. I think the King 10 without a heart, again, is in an annoying spot if we get raised, but King 10 with a heart, we're probably fine. So we're going to bet King 10 with a heart. We're also going to bet Ace 10 with one heart. Having that one heart is going to make it easier for us to bluff rivers in quite a few spots. Ace 10 with no flush draw, but also no hearts. Ace 10 suited, ambiguous. King 10. King 10 is a little better than Ace 10 here, specifically because drilling the queen on the river gives us the nut straight. In fact, for that reason, I might put all the King 10. This is a really close one. I think that King 10 is right in that awkward territory here. So I'm not sure about that one. We're going to keep that one checking for now and maybe come back to it later. So next one is the flush draws. And this is where it gets to the point of we want to be really cautious about how we play against raises, because there's a lot of hands that don't want to face a raise because it's really difficult for them to continue against it. 5-4 is a great example. 5-4 of hearts here. It might be in a position where it just folds if we get raised, but it really sucks just having a weak flush draw and getting raised on this turn because you just don't realize that equity that comes from being able to see the river. Same thing with the king high flush draws here. I would expect the majority of the flush draws that we're going to bet here are going to be hands that also have some other kind of equity. So it's going to be stuff like maybe 8-6. 8-6 is a good flush draw to bet because we can get a 9 to fold sometimes here, which is nice. 8-7 of hearts, I think, is a pretty decent bet here, even though we do have some showdown value. King Jack of hearts, clearly top pair plus flush draw is really good. King 10 of hearts, flush draw plus open ender. Ace 10 of hearts, flush draw plus open ender. Seems fine. We don't really want or need to bet like Ace 8, King 8, Queen 8 at this point, although you could maybe make an argument for Queen 8 to potentially get a 9 to fold. 10-8, same sort of thing. Actually, yeah, I like betting Queen 8 and 10-8 here. Let's put Queen 8 of hearts and 10-8 of hearts in there. Again, we are less polarized in this case. We're okay with betting a little bit more of an equity-driven range with some high equity bluffs in there or some medium equity stuff. So we've got a few different types of hands in there that also have different types of equity. Not flush draws. Again, I think we're going to want to bet the ones probably that have the easiest continues against a raise and maybe the most incentive to just be... They all have a continue against a raise, I think, with the nut flush draw here, but the ones that have the highest equity against a raise is going to be stuff like the ace king and the ace 8. The ace 6 through ace 3, they're a little bit more awkward against a raise, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the ace 8 of hearts in there, and I'm also going to put the ace king of hearts in there. And we've already got the ace queen of hearts in there. I think that's fine. And then we've got combo draws. So there are, again, some combo draws that are going to be in some slightly weird spots here. Ace 7 of hearts is a good example of one that kind of sucks if we get raised. We've got the king 10 in there. We've got the ace 10 in there. What are some other ones? Are there any other ones that I've missed? Jack 10 we've got in there. I think we've actually covered all the combo draws. I think this is an okay turn strategy that we're arriving at. I would probably prefer to be betting a bit more often. So I think what I'm going to do add some more value to this range. Like, I think I'm probably a bit too conservative here on this turn. So we're going to add in, we're going to just have, maybe we just don't need that protection that I was talking about. Maybe we just bet all of our straights and sets and 2 pairs. And then maybe we overpair, we can keep in there. Top pair, I think we're okay with that. Under pair, second pair, third pair, low pair. We probably want to add some more bluffs in there. Oh, you know what? I am actually going to add a couple of combos of straights that check. We're going to check our queen 10 of hearts. We're going to check queen 10 with the queen of hearts or the 10 of hearts. Let's do that. Seems okay. And yeah, so I'm going to add in maybe some more in the way of ace highs. Yeah, I think I like adding in like ace king with a heart just to really apply some pressure to some 1 pair hands. Ace queen with a heart is already in there. Maybe even could add ace queen without a heart. Maybe we just put all the ace queen in there. And maybe we put all the king queen in there as well. Seems okay. So we've got a little bit of polarity emerging kind of here. If you look down at the bottom, we've got that sort of curve happening. It's hard to draw it with a mouse, but like something like that. We don't want a linearity. We don't want that. So I think we're doing okay in terms of construction here. I think we are probably, yeah, this is probably all right. It might be a bit flawed, but we're going to hit confirm just to give ourselves time to take a look at the river. Oh, wow, did pretty well. Okay, so I was not aggressive enough. You can see we're actually betting 74% of the time, and I was only betting 50%. So definitely a little bit too much on the passive side here. But if we look at hands, looks like, oh, pocket tens was a pure bet. Okay, that's why I got a red on that one. But top pair did pretty well on that. Probably should be betting more with top pairs there with Jack X. Second pair, we were basically always checking a 9 when, oh, I actually didn't even remember to go through that. I didn't even go through the 9x category. That's probably why we ended up with that. But yeah, we probably can bet a 9 there quite easily. Ace high, we were betting not enough. So we actually should have been betting some of these nut flush draws a bit more frequently. And the other ace highs. And then no made hand, looks like I was checking a little too much. Oh, it does actually want to bet 5-4. That's interesting. Even 5-4 of hearts. We were off on a few things, but again, we did pretty well here. Equity buckets wise, like draws we were a little bit off with. Equity buckets wise, yeah, we got 3 greens and a yellow. That's really solid. I'm pleased with that. I'm pleased with my ability to break down this spot. This is the kind of situation that's not simple at all by any means, but we arrived at a really good strategy. And there's a couple of flaws in there. There's a few things that we might want to tweak, but this strategy is going to be very effective against any human player here. If we look at the final buckets category, yeah, a couple of different categories we didn't do so well in, but overall, I'm happy with this. And if we were to proceed to the river here, we don't have a ton of time, but I will show you just a little bit of how I would do the river in this spot. We've got a deuce of clubs river that we can look at and check out what I've done with the river. I've allowed fixed sizing. So I've actually created a spot where the hard option here is going to be hard. It's going to be very hard. We've got 133%, we've got 75, we've got 40, and we've got 20, and we've got to check. So we've got all kinds of different options here. If you really wanted to get complex with it, you could pick this one out. You could start to say, what size do I want to bet with these hands, etc. Most likely here, we're just going to have a pretty polar strategy. So I would think that we're just going to go all in or check in this case. And I would think that everything that goes all in is going to be like overpair plus, or particularly maybe like king, queen jack plus, let's say. So we're going to go for value with queen jack plus. We're going to check like jack 10 through probably a lot of our ace highs. And then river bluffs. Clearly we don't have any draws to worry about here. So we really just have to think about it in terms of the hands at the certain threshold, hands below a certain threshold. If we were to just bluff all of our trash hands, that's a lot of hands. We probably don't need to go down that route. In fact, what I think we should do is take the trash hands that have the worst blocking power, which is the missed flush draws, particularly the strong missed flush draws, and just always check those, because the ace high missed flush draw is a bad hand to have here. We're blocking our opponent from having that hand. We also probably don't need to bluff with stuff like queen 8 and 10-8 because we have a pair with those hands. So we're going to get rid of that. That kind of puts us in a pretty decent territory. We're also, again, we probably don't need to bluff any third pair. So we're just going to get rid of that. We don't really need to bluff pocket threes. Ace high, we do have some bluffs here already, but I think stuff like ace-king probably doesn't need to bluff, so we'll get rid of that. Ace-queen, you could maybe make the argument that ace-queen is weak enough that it probably does need to bluff here, especially because it has that straight blocker. I think we can bluff that. This is... yeah, this might be pretty good, honestly. I think that... I'm trying to figure out... oh, 9-8... oh, this is... oh, okay, I see why 9-8 is now not listed as 2-pair. It's because the deuce on the river counterfeited us. So that is an interesting river card for that reason. Ace... what else other ace highs do we have? Yeah, I think any ace high that isn't hearts, I think should probably bluff the river. All these other no-made hands, king highs that are not hearts, or even king high hearts. We might be... yeah, I think we're doing okay here. Let's just hit confirm. See how we did. Inaccuracy, but... oh, wow. So we're actually... huh. That's funny. We were betting way too often. We were not... we were, like, going way too thin for value, right? We're going thin with king-jack for value, but the solver is, like, pretty reluctant, depending on what exact combo we have. The solver's also using the 75% sometimes, which is interesting. But I think for the most part, the actual thresholds of where we're value betting were not too far off. Trips... that's weird. Trips is... it's grading us wrongly for trips, but we don't ever have trips here. We never have ace deuce, so I don't know why it's even including that in this case. Maybe there is some tiny fraction of it in there that I can't see, but that seems to be a little bit of a glitch. Top pair, yeah, we were going too thin with top pair. Oh, man, that's dumb. I also missed that jack 9, jack 8, they're technically classed as top pair, but they're actually better top pair than the others, so that's a confusing thing there. We got the underpair through low pair right. And then when it comes to the bluffs, there were certain bluffs that we went with that we should not have gone with. I think we're over bluffing here. It doesn't want us to bluff with some of the weak king highs. No made hand. Yeah, 6-5, 5-4, we're bluffing some of those. So basically what's happened is because we were over value betting, we were like going too thin for value, we ended up over bluffing as well, right? Now, the actual frequency of bluffs that we had here might not have been that bad, considering the fact that we were also betting more top pairs and things like that. But if we just look in a vacuum, compare our final version to the sim, we were slightly over bluffing. But I think we did a decent job here. We did get some reds on the river, obviously. We were a little bit off with certain categories of hands, but this is a really good example, really good guideline of how you can use the range builder to enhance your ability to build a coherent strategy for 3 streets. And really, this is just a fundamental skill. It's a really important skill that no matter what games you play in, the ability to build a strategy like this is going to be super important. So hopefully that was very useful for you guys. That's going to be it for today. I hope everybody has a good weekend and runs good this weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.